Hey guys, Jake Carlson here, host of the Modern Leadership Podcast. Are you ready to focus on amplifying your leadership superpowers? Let's go! Happy New Year, Achievers. I hope that you have had a very safe and a super fun New Year celebration. Are you ready to make 2018 the best year ever? I am so excited for the things we have planned here at Modern Leadership and over on jkcarlson.com. Here's to 2018. Today, we are going to dive into a topic that comes up, it seems like everywhere we turn. Millennials in the workforce. Millennials, those born between approximately 1980 and 2000, are the largest generation currently in the workforce. Some estimates tag the number at nearly 80 million people. Not only do they dominate the workforce by sheer population, they also have the most spending power of any generation in history. Over 3.5 trillion, and that's trillion with a T, of spending power. If you have been ignoring millennials, it is time to stop. And so today, I am bringing on the Millennial Whisperer, Lee Caraher. Lee is the founder and CEO of Double Forte, a 15-year-old public relations and digital media agency she built, starting in a garage, a true Bay Area story, into the multi-million-dollar company it is today. Along the way, she literally wrote the book on hiring and retaining high-performing multi-generational teams. Lee is the author of 2 books, Millennials Management, and more recently, The Boomerang Principle, which is about inspiring lifetime loyalty from our employees. And I can't wait to jump into that because it's so vital today. Through her work, she shows companies how to embrace the qualities of different generations, how to recognize the significant benefits of shifting the definition of company loyalty from tenure, long tenure, to lifetime of allegiance. She's a graduate of Carleton College, has a degree in medieval history, which she finds useful every day. Splitting time between San Francisco and New York. Lee, the Millennial Whisperer, it is so great to sit down with you today. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Jake. Here's to a great 2018.
It's going to be incredible, and I'm so excited for it. This is a great way to kick it off. But I got to ask you, medieval history, daily, come on, really?
Medieval history, which is so fascinating, and of course is the study of over 1,000 years of history. Here's what I learned from it: how to figure something out, how to articulate it, and how to defend it. And that's what I do every single day. And that's what all leaders need to know how to do: how to figure something out, how to articulate your point of view, and how to defend it and move it forward.
And isn't it so important for leaders to be unique and to be able to talk to topics that aren't just the same things that everybody's talking about, a way to stand out? And I love this medieval history topic.
Well, people come to work. And I think more and more, maybe in the past it was we just wanted our leaders to be one-dimensional. And that is not going to be a successful model going forward. And the more you can bring your whole body and your whole self and your whole soul to work and reserve some for yourself, the more successful you will be.
And you're the Millennial Whisperer. This is what you've gained this reputation of talking and being able to speak to and about millennials. And that comment you just made about bringing our whole selves to work, I think really embodies this millennial in the workplace mindset. And so can you talk to us a little bit more about bringing our whole self to work, why it's important and why it's going to be more important as we go forward?
I think that probably the best analogy is to use sort of work-life balance as an analogy, which, of course, we all know doesn't work. But in the last 25 years, work-life balance has been a dominant agenda and topic in business writing, business media, and sort of at work, right? And before the internet, we used to think of work-life balance as we went to work 9 to 5, there was a movie 9 to 5, and then you left and you had a life, work and then life. But today, work and life they go in and out of each other all day long, right? All day long. You wake up and you're looking at your email, and then all of a sudden you're making breakfast and you're going for a run and you're trying, all this stuff, right? But everything goes in and out all day long. And I really encourage everyone in my office to look at their personal stuff all day long, because so much happens now in email that you can get lost in or get left out of if you're not paying attention. So when the day is such that it's not divided, It's not clearly divided work and life, number one. Number two is, we are all looking for purpose in our days. And, as long as you're the best person doing what you're doing, you have a purpose in life. And the purpose through work, we spend more time in our workplace and doing our work than we do in anything else. And I think, although it is attributed to millennials in terms of wanting to have that full life experience and have a purpose and make sure that you're contributing, but it's not only millennials who want this. I think everybody wants it. Millennials have been conditioned and brought up to think about it and to ask and demand it of themselves and their employers from day one. So when you can actually create an environment where millennials thrive, Gen Xers and boomers thrive too. The reverse is not necessarily true. And it really is about who's that full person and what are you interested in and how do you make sure that you are contributing and being part of the team and what's your role and how do you contribute and all those kind of things. It's a different mindset than the ones, I'm a boomer, I'm the last year of boomer, than the mindset that I had to have to start my own career.
And I love this conversation. I'm not a millennial. I mentioned before, I'm actually the tail end of Generation X. And when you talk about work-life balance and you look at the generation, and I think it's kind of funny when you think of it this way, baby boomers, they didn't have work-life balance. They just had work. And then Generation X, we sought for work-life balance, where what you talked about, where we separated our time and our activities. Millennials are seeking this thing called work-life integration, which is going over the top of each other. And I love having this conversation. I often joke that my generation, we know what it's like to walk both ways from the TV and shag carpeting to change the channel. Millennials know what it's like to not have Wi-Fi at Starbucks. And so as we move now into
and
this
not have
generation,
a television in their house.
Yeah,
right?
The television's in my hand now, right?
Exactly.
So I want to ask you though, you do a lot of speaking on millennials, and there's a lot of people out there that have done writing and speaking on millennials. Are we about played out of the discussion of millennials? I mean, 80 million of them in the workforce. It's time to just accept that they're here. Do we now start talking about Generation Z?
We are talking about Generation Z for sure now, and it, depending on who you ask, Generation Z starts at a different time. If you use 1980 to 2000, the youngest millennial today is 16 years old, 17 years old this year. So they still have 5 or more years before they get into the real, into the workforce, the post-college workforce, right? Generation Z, sort of like how you talked about being on the tail end of Gen X, the tail end of millennials is sort of now and there'll be a blended section between the people who are 17, 16 years old today and the people who are 10 years old today. That whole section will be a blended generation, much like you're blended on the tail end of Gen X.
Sure.
I think that the interesting thing for Gen Z and millennial, the difference is boomers are going to keep working for a long. There are a lot of boomers, right? 78 million boomers in this country, 10,000 trying to retire every day, but most boomers working much longer than they ever anticipated and having to work. The most fortunate of the most fortunate, they don't have to work, but most boomers are thinking about working past 70 in some way, shape, or form. And that is the dynamic. And I'm 53 and I'm the last boomer. So I got maybe 20 more years to go. I'm going to be working with these young people for another 20 years.
Yeah.
And so I think this generation, and today we have 4 generations in the workplace, and soon we might have 5. So we have the silent generation, anyone over 68. We have the Gen Xers. We have the boomers, 53 to 68. We have the Gen Xers. We have the millennials. And soon we'll have the Z. We may have 5 generations in the workplace altogether. And while it is, I think, destructive to think about, they're all so different. If we don't appreciate the differences between the generations, we can't sort of transcend it and create, great intergenerational work teams because boomer only workplace, not a thing of the past, never going to happen again. Millennial only workplace, not going to happen. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
Given the demands of our culture and the economy. So I don't think it's played out. I think it's too negative, right? It's so negative. And I'm not happy about that. So I'm on a mission to make sure it's positive conversation and we can appreciate each other.
Well, and let me ask you about that, because it seems that when we talk about millennials in the workforce, it really comes down to two topics of conversation. Either, boy, they're not doing what we need them to do. They don't listen. They don't have respect. We're just trying to get by, dealing with them as little as possible. Or on the flip side, we're saying, well, they are who they are, and we're going to have to accept them the way they are. And so it's either we're going to forget about them or we're going to accept them. And I'm wondering, as we look at this, if we're creating a self-fulfilling prophecy by treating millennials in a certain way within the workforce, talking about them in these conferences and on these podcasts in a certain way, and if that is affecting the way that they come to work and act.
I think that's true. I do. I agree. And which I'm trying to, sort of get rid of those two types of conversations to talk about. There's no reason, they are who they are. We should just deal with them how they are. Well, there's no reason not to have high expectations around work performance, work behavior, all those kinds of things. At the same time, there are standards of work and standards of behavior that help businesses go forward. And business has to be a business. You have to make, no mission, no margin, no mission, right? And so just not training and expecting people to create a profitable environment for any business is a recipe for disaster. At the same time, hanging on to the negativity, like, oh, they're just so terrible and they're lazy, they don't do what I need to do. I mean, that just drives down profit too, because that is just a time waster, energy suck, a profit crusher. And if you just think about it, from a business perspective, you just want to drive all those kinds of things out of your business, which in the end comes to how do we create teams of people who are all pulling in the same direction, who are all motivated to show up every day, and who all have the same standard of behavior and expectations so that they're all achieving. Because who doesn't want to achieve? Everybody wants to achieve. It's a question of how you frame it. And if we just are negative about those people, one, we don't train them and they leave faster, and that's just a loss. Or two, if we just say, oh, they're just going to show up whenever they want to show up, well, that's not a business. People just, maybe I won't come in today. Not okay, right? Not okay. But if you don't address it in a positive way, no one can improve. And it's not just millennials who are late. I know they get a lot of bad rap for that, but I know plenty of other people who are older than the millennials in the workplace who could use a little brush up on what is acceptable behavior and standards in the office.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned that. I just did a presentation on millennials last week, and as I was putting together, I found some funny quotes. One of them is, let's talk about those people who struggle making decisions and would rather hike the Himalayas than climb the corporate ladder. Of course, everybody's thinking we're talking about millennials, right? They crave attention. They have a short attention span. Well, this is what Time Magazine said about Gen X in 1990.
Absolutely. Here's the thing about Gen X. So Gen X is a just really interesting situation. So Gen X, it's the smallest generation. Your generation should have more opportunity than either the boomers or the millennials because it's a smaller group of people, right? However, and that year that you talked about, right, 1990 to 1998, really, that's where it was the Gen X, heyday. I ran a different company at that time, and it was every day I had to counter somebody because there weren't enough Gen Xers to get the entry-level jobs. And in the dot-com boom, it was if you had a pulse, you got a job, and my door was revolving of, I got another offer, and I would just say, okay, 20% more, whatever. Until one day I was like, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. It was exhausting. HQ was like, keep all the butts in seats, whatever you have to do, save 20% off your top line so you can give them 20%, blah, blah, blah. And I just was like, I'm not doing this anymore. And I stopped countering people, which was a surprise to the first person who talked to me about it. But when I stopped countering, my people stayed longer and our work improved and our productivity improved. And when when we were creating all these kinds of benefits for Gen Xers at that time, which were, go to the Himalayas. We'll pay for you to have the sabbatical in the Himalayas, kind of stuff, because we couldn't keep this very small generation in the workforce. Well, then the 2000 NASDAQ crash, and then 2001, 9/11 just crushed the opportunity for Gen Xers and really shrank the market dramatically. And then as things are getting better, 2006, 2007, 2008, they're coming back into the workplace. People, Gen Xers are recovering from having not had opportunity in 2000 and 2001, 2002. Then 2008 implosion happens just as Gen Xers are getting to be 35, 36, prime career development time, and 8 million people lose their jobs. So it is not true that Gen Xers have all the opportunity, because boomers are hanging on, like I said, much longer than they anticipated. And this tsunami of millennials are coming out of college ready to work. So there's different cultural things, too, in each of these generations that people have to think about. Boomers are not happy about the fact that they're working longer than they thought. We all thought we'd be on the beach at 50. Well, that came and went. And then Gen Xers have been squashed twice, right in the prime of their career development time. And then millennials, particularly the older millennials, so the oldest millennial this year, 36, this generation has crushing student debt that although they do have huge, like you said, trillions of dollars of buying power, a lot of that buying power is being sucked up by their student debt that they didn't anticipate having, because they thought their boomer parents would be paying for it. But their boomer parents lost their money in 2008 and could not pay for the education they anticipated for their children. So it's not as easy as millennials are this way and boomers are that way, right? It's a very messy ecosystem. And when we understand those different pressures that are personal pressures, these are personal pressures. I wanted to do this and I can't because I have to earn this money. Or I wanted to be here, but I can't because I couldn't move, because I couldn't get out of my house, or all those things. When you understand the full person, then you can actually create a much more productive work environment, because by accepting the full person and helping that person achieve their own personal goals within the context of your work, you are creating more efficient and better work all the time.
Well, that is a great synopsis of where we're at with the workforce. And I couldn't agree with you more. When you look at, there's blurring of the lines between all these generations. You've got so many different types of backgrounds and histories dealing with technology, languages, all of this coming together at the same time. So I want to talk a little bit about the workforce, the modern workforce, and I want to talk about business etiquette. I want to talk about manners in the workforce today.
That's such a touchy subject, right?
It really is.
And I actually created a box. So everyone in the world, no matter what language, could benefit from reading the Emily Post Business Etiquette Advantage book, right?
Oh,
everybody.
Boy. I've heard this one. My wife tells me to read this all the time.
Wonderful book. It is $50. It is a doorstop, and it's very challenging. I bought it for everybody on my staff.
Really?
And I'll tell you why in a second. And no one cracked it open because it's so large. It's very daunting, right? And the reason I bought it was when I was interviewing people to come onto my company, I was always the last in line to interview people, and I would take people to lunch or to dinner, and it was meant to be a conversation, like see how people, connect on a personal level so they could get to know me, and do they want to be in a company led by me, blah, 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 but also to see how they handled themselves, because in my business, we do a lot of entertaining. Well, there was two people who I did not hire, which, in reflection, that was dumb, because they could not eat. And when I say they could not eat, of course they could eat. They put food in their mouth and it went to the belly, right? But we're at a restaurant here in San Francisco, which is a food capital, and as you know, and one gentleman put his phone on the table and he picked his teeth and he didn't put his napkin in his lap, and he basically guzzled his water down. And I was like, oh my God, what just happened? And the other woman didn't know how to use her silverware, like literally didn't know what silverware to use, and put her lipstick on at the table with me there and all these things. And I was like, I cannot hire these people. Oh my goodness, they're terrible. And that's so short-sighted. I really kicked myself later. I was like, I can teach people how to eat. I cannot teach people how to be inquisitive, how to take initiative, to be good people, to want to work with other people. I can't teach that, but I can teach people how to eat. And then from that, I bought everybody that book. No one cracked it open. So then from there, we created this program called Everything Speaks at Double Forte, which is actually two things. One is a course that we give here, which is taking people out to dinner and showing them how to use everything. And then two is this box of over 190 now etiquette things at the workplace. And people want to say that this is one of the biggest complaints about millennials is that they're rude and they don't show respect. Well, in my experience, 95% of these people are not rude. They're just uninformed. They don't know what rude is. And particularly in a blended environment like San Francisco, where you're getting people from all over the world to come and work together, what's rude in one culture is not in the other. And if you come from the South and you come from the Northwest, you may not have anything in common about how to hold a knife. And you might have very high judgment about the other person holding their knife the wrong way. So we basically created Everything Speaks to level set everybody and to create a standard of behavior around take the earbuds out of your ears when you walk into the office. Don't keep your sunglasses on top of your head when you're interviewing. Don't chew gum with your mouth open. I mean, these things that when I went to cotillion when I was young, right? I had to learn how to cut butter using bananas. I mean, that's really what, talk about a throwback. No one learns how to cut butters with bananas anymore, but how to use a butter knife and how to use a butter plate and where to put the bread. People don't talk about that anymore. And then you get into a formal dining environment and people do it wrong. And when I say wrong, that's a very judgmental word, right? But what happens is you put this judgment on the other person because they don't know where to put their knife or they're buttering if you have a high standard of those Tiffany behaviors, right? So what we have to do is to say they're not rude, they're uninformed. And then each culture, a business culture should, I think, set a standard for that behavior that what you expect around dress, around when you show up for a meeting. Like in my office, if you are on time, you're late, right? If your meeting starts at 10, you need to be there 5 minutes before. You don't talk about your personal life on a conference call because who knows who's listening. I mean, you just have these things that you educate people on. And then I've never had someone say that stupidly.
So let me ask you this, because I agree with it. I don't think it's stupid at all. I think it's so vitally important. I'm hoping that my kids and the kids of Generation Z, that they'll start picking this up earlier than when they get to the workforce. Like, I hate to hear that, they coming out of college and they're just learning this now. But right now, the demand for good talent is so high. I mean, you talk about how you just needed a pulse in the late 90s to get a job. I think we're the opposite now, where
Yes.
to get a good job, you have to be like the cream of the crop. You have to be at the top. And so I'm looking at what you're talking about. And while I do agree with you that you can teach people to eat, isn't it automatically a differentiator when you've got 3 candidates and they're all high-level individuals and one of them can't eat? You say, yeah, sure, I could teach them how to use a fork, but this person already knows how. And so how do we as parents, or how do we as early employers, entry-level employers, what do we need to do to either find those individuals that already have it or train our individuals to become it?
Well, I think there's two things. I mean, you bring up a thing about parenting, right? And I think what's ironic, of course, is that the most people complaining about millennials are boomers and the most parents of millennials are boomers, right?
Yeah.
I'll just leave that there, Jake. Because parenting is very different, and everyone got a trophy, and everybody wins soccer, and grade inflation, which is very parent driven in the last 15 years. So the first thing is, if you see a helicopter parent, fly, wrestle them to the ground and don't let them fly anymore, because they're not doing their children any favors. Not doing their children any favors by not expecting a high level of behavior and stand on your own and do your own work and all that kind of stuff. In terms of, you're right. If I had 3 candidates who were equal in the things we look for, which is writing talent, initiative, teamwork, and good person, all that kind of stuff, and one could eat and the other two couldn't, I would take the one who could eat because it's going to cost me less. Done. Right? In terms of, I think it's a unrealistic expectation, however, that everybody who at the entry level will come with the behavior standards that you require. And if you just sort of dismiss people because they don't have those skills that are trainable, then you're letting yourself shrinking your workforce potential versus saying, just starting in that first month or first 2 months of someone's tenure saying, okay, here's our standard. Here's how we dress. Here's how we show up. Here's how we don't show up. Here, yes, you can wear jeans, but nothing with holes. You can't have whatever it is, whatever your standard is. I don't really care what your standard is as long as you have one, because people are looking for those guidelines that they may not have had their whole lives before they get into the workforce. And the more you can give into them and have it not be an issue, the better you're helping yourself and helping them. And if we're only looking for the people who fit every single box, we will be sorely disappointed and we'll lose a lot of good talent along the way.
And I think more employers and more leaders need to realize that there are good people out there that are going to take your companies to the next level that don't have a check mark in every single box, in every standard that you have. Now, some are non-negotiable. Some you have to have or you're gone. But other things can be taught and learned. And you got to look at those intangibles and say, do they have the ability to take me to the next level? And so, Leah, I love this conversation. I come from the generation that knows who Zig Ziglar is. I know there's a few listeners who are wondering who that is, but he talks about that it is better to train your employees and have them leave to the competition than to not train them and have them stay. And with that intro, I want to go into this new book that you have, The Boomerang, and this shifting definition of company loyalty versus this lifetime allegiance.
Yes. So my latest book is The Boomerang Principle, How to Inspire Lifetime Loyalty for Your Employees. And the concept is we used to think about, this is a boomer concept, if you leave me, you betray me, and you're dead to me. And this is very short-sighted in today's environment. I think it was always short-sighted, but it's really short-sighted today when millennials have been conditioned, one, not to stay in jobs forever, because their parents got caught flat-footed in 2008, to probably expect to have 4 to 6 different careers, not different jobs, different careers. Like I will be a chef and I will be a PR practitioner and I will be an author. They really do expect to have many different careers in their lives. And if that's the expectation, that they shouldn't stay very long. And when I say very long, they shouldn't stay, more than 4 or 5 years. They definitely shouldn't stay for 10 years, kind of thing. Well, those of us who've been in business for a long time and have different perspectives, like, oh, well, you're short term until you've been here for 5 years. Well, that is just going to set you up for failure. So instead of thinking about tenure and loyalty when I pay you, which by definition is not loyalty, that's a transaction, right? But thinking about a person that you have chosen to be at your company, who then can be valuable to the company for their entire existence, their entire lives, regardless of whether you're paying them or not, it totally changes your framework, right? And it says, how can I make sure I have the best alumni possible, right? Training people early, right? Because today, if millennial doesn't get training, and then Gen Z is going to be the same, if they don't get training, they're out. They're used to having a lot of training in their lives, right? If you don't invest in their learning, there's the door. And some people are like, oh, I'm not going to train them because they're going to leave me. Well, you've just shortened their tenure with you when you have that point of view. So take the Zig Ziglar approach, which is train. And if they leave you, 1, you have trained them and they will be thankful for that work, right? 2, you've created someone in the work world who has a great relationship with you, is thankful, has learned at your behest, and goes out into the world and can advocate for you, either as someone, oh my gosh, Jake, I met Julie the other day and she would be awesome in your team. I know you're looking for somebody. I think you should meet Julie. Well, I have just shortened your recruiting time by months, and I've killed your recruiting fee, right? By just bringing someone, I know Jake. I worked for Jake for several years. I saw Julie. Oh my gosh, you should work for Jake.
And Leah, I think this is so huge because the business world is small. And I love this concept. And I want everybody to stop their treadmill or put down the dishes they're washing and listen to this, because this is so important. The world is small when it comes to business. And the people that leave you will be the referrers to you, not just of employees, but of business. You'll partner, you'll work together. And as the globe becomes more flattened, as people do more stuff virtually, I think that we're going to be hiring one-off consultants or one-off operators, project managers, more than we ever have before. And so it's important to keep this relationship with our employees.
So true. And, maybe 4 or 5 years later, they come back to you, and by definition, you want them to come back. I mean, you have said you're going to hire them, and they are more valuable to you when they come back, because they've been out in the world, they've done other things, they have different reference points, but they already know your culture. They already know what you value. So when if they come back as a full-time employee or a part-time employee or whatever, they got a fast track to becoming fully productive faster, right? And it's a great message for the people who are in your company. So my company's 15 years old. We're very small. We're 35 people. But in the 15 years, we have rehired 12 people, and we have rehired 4 people twice.
And that statistic is so important for you and what you're talking about. That's why you're tracking it.
That's why I'm tracking it, right? I track it. And then I can tell you that most of our business comes from people who have worked with us or who have worked for us. And most of the recruiting that we do comes from our alumni. I think that the key to a sustainable business really is, I'm a big people person, can you tell, is the people, and keeping, and once you've taken the effort to hire someone, you should take the effort to keep them in your tribe for as long as they live, right? Because really loyalty is about doing something you don't have to do, that you're not getting paid for. It is not about being paid in a paycheck. That's a transaction. Loyalty is when you don't have to do something and you go out of your way to call Jake, to introduce Jake to Julie, because you know that's going to be a good match. Oh my gosh, Jake, I was on this podcast. You need to be on that podcast, or whatever it is, right? Because you're you're increasing your footprint. Every time someone leaves you in today's world, they can help you or hurt you with social media. You should do everything you can to neutralize the hurt, right? Always. And part of that is just saying, congratulations on your next job. I hope in the future, when you decide to leave that job, call me, because I hope there's a position here for you, because I would love to have you come back. And of course, it's up to that person to be able to leave Boomerang eligible, and not everybody does, right? Some people are dumb.
Burning bridges.
Don't burn the bridge. And it's never been more important. Never been so important than that, because the world is getting smaller. We're all connected in so many different ways.
Well, Lee, you are tapped in on this. You know exactly what you're talking about. And that is the reason that the listeners need to go and pick up this Boomerang book to learn more deeply about it, because we are running out of time. We don't have any more time to talk about it. But the conversation has been fantastic. Get the book, read the book, learn how to retain and attain good talent over the period of your career. And with that, Lee, I want to switch us to our final topic, which is I want to talk about what you're reading and what you're watching these days. A section we call Learning from Leaders. Sound like a plan?
Absolutely.
All right. How about the book currently on your Kindle or bedside table?
It's called The Power of Onlyness by Nilofer Merchant.
Onlyness?
Onlyness. What is your power that only you can bring to the world, and celebrating that and bringing it to the world.
Oh, I love it. We're going to add that to the Modern Leadership Book Club. I love that. How about the best movie ever made?
Best movie ever made, Pride and Prejudice from BBC.
All right. How about your leadership superpower?
My is appreciation. I think that appreciation, we know there's statistics and data that shows that people who feel appreciated outperform those who don't by up to 30%. And I have found myself that when we understand people's gifts, special gifts in the world, and put them to work and celebrate them and thank them for their work, that it's basically unlimited. Your options are unlimited.
So why wouldn't you do it?
Why wouldn't you? Which was hard. I'll tell you, it was hard for me, Jake. My father was is now retired, but he was a cardiac surgeon, and in our household, please and thank you were implied. Because Lee, if I ask please and thank you for the scalpel every time, that person might die. And I like that. We're not in the operating room right now.
We're not all operating.
So when I really had to learn how to say please and thank you throughout my day, and in my business we track time. And when I learned how to do this, I felt really foolish. But within a month, I could see a 4% increase in productivity in the time tracking. And then by the end, now people show up and they're like, "You guys are so nice." But being nice and having a high standard of work can go hand in hand.
Absolutely. All right. Our final question then is the best business book ever written.
The best business, there's so many.
So many.
I really think the art of conversation in business is actually out of print, and but it's fantastic. And it just talks about how conversation can drive a business so effectively.
It sounds like a good idea for a rewrite. Somebody needs to bring out a modern version.
I probably do that for a living. Maybe that's my next thing, Jake.
and credit where credit's due, right? Lee, we have had so much fun with you today. Before we let you go, do you have a motivational quote, mantra, or philosophy you can leave us with? And then how can we find out more about Double Forte, your books, and what you're up to?
Sure. My mantra is focus is your friend. And every time I feel like once you have a goal, focus on it and it comes true. So I say it all the time. My staff knows it well. How people can find out about my company is it's www.double-forte.com. And you can see all about what we do for clients and there. And for my books, you can go to leecaraher.com, www.leecaraher.com. And there you can find my books. You can find some downloadables on how to communicate better and how to say thank you in a lot of different kinds of ways. And my speaking and my Twitter is @leecaraher, and I'm frankly very easy to find. I guess I just realized, Jake. So...
Well, and we're going to link all that up on one spot on our website so that they can just go there and go to all of what you're doing and what you're up to. I think what you're doing is amazing, Lee. You are the Millennial Whisperer, but not just millennials. You're the workplace and workforce whisperer, and I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing with us. One of my favorite things that you talked about is having the best alumni possible. And I really try to do that with this podcast. And you are a great alumni guest of this podcast. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much. And I hope that everyone's off to a great year in 2018. Good luck to you all.
Hey, my friends, I think I could have gone on for another hour or 2 hours. I love this conversation of the workforce and the workplace and how we as different generations and different cultures, different languages, different backgrounds and different traditions can really come together and move in a forward positive direction. I love talking about this new climate in the workforce where we have people who want to be trained, they want to do well, they want to exceed and excel, and they want to be promoted. And, maybe they don't work as long as we did in the past for that promotion, and maybe they want to jump ladder pretty quickly, but they are bringing to the workforce a tremendous energy and a drive and a passion that other areas of the workforce could really be built on or really take lessons from and grow. I mentioned it at the end of the podcast. I love this idea of having the best alumni possible. If you set that as your goal as a hirer, I will only hire people that I know are going to be the best alumni. Would it change who you hire? Instead of just putting a body in the position, instead of just bringing somebody on board because you have a need and it needs to be filled, but really thinking about those new hires as somebody that's going to be an alumni someday. They likely will not be with you forever. Right now, the average millennial is staying for 2 years. The average Gen X is 5 years, and the average baby boomer is 7 years. So even baby boomers are bouncing around a little bit. Who is your alumni, and what are you doing to invest in your alumni so that they come back around either as hires or referrers or as clients or as partners. I think that's so vitally important. Of course, everything we talked about, how to get in touch with Lee, get her books, find out more about what she's up to, it's all on the website, jakeacarlson.com/ML49 for episode 49. And welcome to 2018. It's going to be an awesome year. I'm so excited. Had a great New Year's celebration, but now I'm ready for the action. And so with that, I want to wish you the best year of 2018 ever, and stay awesome. Thanks for listening to the Modern Leadership Podcast. You can find me on Facebook at Speaker Jake, on Twitter at Jake A. Carlson, and of course the website, jakeacarlson.com. See you there.